Hi, Robert. It's so great to be on here. And I usually describe myself as the lead developer of Open Interpreter,
Yeah.
and
And
now the O1 project.
yes, and you caught my eye because, you're one of the few people who got your peers excited about what you're building, right? And that happens once in a while. I was one of the first users of Instagram because the same thing, I was at a startup incubator and everybody's like, "Oh, you gotta check out what those 2 guys have," right? And getting the, uh, getting, your peers, particularly in the AI developer world, to say, "Man, this guy has something legit," is like, congrats. But now,
Thank you.
it's hard to be a media person right now because I can either talk to the nerds and go nerdy and talk about, architectures and, what's going on underneath, how to make an LLM or something like that. Or we could talk to regular everyday people who probably don't
Yeah,
know that much about open interpreter, right? Or what
yeah,
even what we talk about in the industry, the LLMs or RAG or whatever. They're like, "What?" And
yeah,
if they think
yeah,
about AI, they're usually freaked out. And your team is bringing a product that is a little freaky, let's be honest about, it, right? So let's just dive in. What are you building? What is this new device that that you've already sold out, by the way? Congrats. But
yeah. Thank you very much. Um, yeah, and just too on the point about exciting peers, this has been something that the O1 project, this new device that's built by a pretty big team of just folks that were excited to have something like this in their hands. So I definitely can't say it's just me or just even Open Interpreter, that's been doing it because it was a like 20 people in Seattle that were really behind it. But what I spent all my time thinking about and building is the interface between language models and computers. That's how I usually describe it. And that has led to a couple really interesting projects. So the first thing that I spend most of my time building is Open Interpreter, which is kind of it's a way for language models to run code on your computer. And it has some bizarre emergent properties um, that just really lends itself to kind of the core of the Star Trek computer, like the core dream of something that you can talk to that's capable not only of flexible intelligence like language models, and that's as easy to interact with as ChatGPT, but also capable of like all the stuff that you're doing on your computer. So all of the math and deterministic, the connection that that has to the internet and everything else that you can do on a computer. And that core technology is Open Interpreter, which is like just language models that can run code. And then the O1 project is this new thing, which is okay, now let's kind of take that to the extreme and build something that is like building a computer from the ground up and saying, all right, there is this vision for what a computer can be that looks a lot more like a language model operating a computer under the hood and you talking to the language model. And I thought that Rabbit and the Rabbit R1
yeah,
articulated this perfectly. They
which
just
which
Jesse had a really incredible yeah.
yeah, which I had the first interview before he went to CES, and he dominated CES, the Consumer Electronics
Yeah.
Show, with the Rabbit. I mean,
Yeah.
he had dramatically more PR than any other device out of this huge
Yeah.
show, right? Which shows
Yeah.
there's a lot of interest in this new kind of device that you can talk to and it does things for you and it
Yeah.
remembers things for you and right.
I
So
love you can talk to and
you're
it does things
riffing
for you.
on the Rabbit with an open
Yeah.
source approach, which is wh why well, we'll talk a little bit later about why open source matters so much, but keep going on the device. What is this new device, and, what is it gonna let us do that Siri can't do, or Alexa can't do, or
Yeah.
Google Assistant can't do?
Yeah, well, riffing more on the Rabbit and what their idea was for, like, a large action model. The idea is and I don't know what they have under the hood. What we have under the hood is a large language model that runs code. Um, and and I'm not sure what's going on inside the rabbit, but what that lets you do when you're talking to a language model that can control a computer, um, you can think about anything that you can do on a computer being something that this is capable of. So
Like
in the
making the
demo, that's
screen
quite a lot of
brighter? Yeah.
making the screen brighter. Definitely a lot of for some reason like, yeah, it's become like our hello world is to switch it to dark mode. Like that's always how we tested. That was the first thing we ever tried with it. Um, so changing system settings, sure, but I'm way more interested in kind of like, okay, what does it look like to use all of your productivity tools in this way that a language model has access to your calendar, access to your email, is capable of summarizing things and drafting email responses for you. Um, that's all a very very exciting thing. I am somebody who I come from like PR and media. Like I did TikTok shorts before this, and so I think a lot about editing workflows and everything that I want to have it be doing in Premiere and in Photoshop. Um, you kind of
Or
think about
Descript.
all of the
We're using
things.
Descript to do this video, and that's an AI
The
driven
script's
tool, right?
incredible.
I love
I
Descript,
love the
but it
script.
still
Yeah,
has things that it doesn't do. I can't do really good demos. I was talking to the team there yesterday.
yeah,
Demo can't be audio, but that's off the point of what you can do. You're trying to build some sort of Jarvis where I can just talk to to the world and things start happening. "Hey, edit this video," or "Send an email to
yeah.
Joe," or right? Is that sort of where you're trying to drive us to?
Exactly, exactly. Where it's headed is that you talk to something that literally operates your mouse and your keyboard or runs code to try to get things done on your computer. Um, and yeah, I mean the that's so cool that you brought up Descript too, because Descript has been actually their design team has been a huge inspiration. And shout out to Esha, who's I'm a big fan of. Um, yeah, I mean the vision of what is a person able to do with a computer? Like, I would never judge my own abilities or somebody else's abilities without a computer. If I was like, "What can you do?" and I just put you in a room, that's a very different question of what you can do as a human when you have access to these tools. Um, and so the dream of kind of equipping these language models with flexible intelligence, with tools of deterministic power, um, and then trying to kind of, in the same direction that like when you first introduced the mouse and the keyboard, there was this suddenly hundreds of millions more people who could use computers.
Yeah,
And then you introduced multi-touch, the iPhone, and that just like penetration across the world into how it is that so many more people could use these devices because direct manipulation is like chimpanzees can use it. You can see like them using Instagram because it's such an intuitive thing. There is there is suddenly the ability to fill in the cognitive layer of that and to make it so that it's not just easier to use the machine and then the knobs, but it's suddenly easier because it can use the machine and the knobs, and you can just tell it what you want. Just make it so.
yeah. How
I
does
love too the idea of a machine that you don't have to learn how to use.
yeah.
That's something
You know,
yeah,
I worked at Microsoft, and one day I worked on the support line, and I had to help a customer drag an icon across the screen, and for this customer, it was very frustrating. It was frustrating for me because I think
yeah,
that's easy. I just click and drag, right? And
yeah,
I've done that for a long, long time. But for many people, that's a struggle to understand
yeah,
how to use a computer. My grandma comes over and has me send in her taxes because she just struggles to go to a web page and fill out a form and figure out what how to enter it all in, and she's not sure of herself, so she'd rather have me do it, right? There's a lot of
yeah.
people like that who struggle with computers.
This has been seriously the beginning of this project happened with my grandma, um, who passed away recently. Is she was a vet. She was a veteran, and she asked me to apply for VA housing for her. And this was like one of the last conversations we had where she asked to um, for me to apply to V8 housing, and I could not do it. Like, literally, if you try to go and figure out how to do this, it is I know how to use computers, and even I had it was so much information, and so, I mean, like, the PDFs and the everything, like, yes, it's great that we have restructured human society so that you use a computer to get through, like, essential services, sure, like, I think that that's better than probably where we were. If you are computer illiterate, you cannot navigate modern society. You cannot access basic essential services from the government. Um, Design becomes like cruel design. Um, and what the cognitive layer that this gets to add and wrap around computers and make it so that if you want something, like it ought to have been that if you want to sign up for V8 housing, you ask your computer to help you with it. And a vision language model is capable of looking at the screen, of calling up the web browser, of asking you what details you need for Medicaid or for V8 housing, and maybe even knows where that information is because it put it there in the first place. This is a computer literacy project first. Um, and by the way, you talk about teaching people to drag icons across the screen. It's no different too, actually, if you have a computer operating language model um, that is capable of operating a computer for it to instead display a little tooltip around what you're supposed to click and explain to you why you should click it. Um, so I'm very interested too in if you have technology that can use computers, you have technology that can teach people how to use computers. Now, it might be the world we're headed that that's not even necessary, and that they are actually capable of you don't even have to look at the screen. Like I kind of see that version of a computer being possible, um, where it's all happening under the hood. Um, But, yeah, it's interesting that you brought up your grandma and also the education aspect of it. Um, and a reason why 001 resonated to me, honestly, was because 0 to 1, that we at Open Interpreter have talked about this, that, like, this is very cool technology and it's very fun. Right now it's in your terminal and it's for developers and it's some people kind of assume that it's for software programmers. It's not. The future of this is for people who do not know how to use a computer. This is for the, like, billions on the edge that this is gonna be their way of getting into using computers and doing what we've been able to do so easily. I grew up with computers. It's in my brain. And to give people that little bit of brain that they can use, um, to get onto if this didn't bring you onto the digital revolution, like, if nothing else before did, then this will. And 0 to 1 as, like, it's for the people that are from 0 to 1 of computer literacy is how we've thought about it. Um, and so, yeah, I'm glad you brought both those up.
When you say computer, I usually think of a Macintosh or a Windows box, but it could be a Tesla car. It could be a Linux box. It could be a phone. It could be a tablet of various kinds, right? It could be a Chinese
Yeah,
operating system.
yeah.
How are you gonna join with a single idea, all of these disparate kinds of computing? Heck, we haven't even started talking about VR or Apple Vision Pro
Yeah.
or like the Quest 3, right? Which are completely new paradigms of computing, right? Compared to a flat 2D screen, my Macintosh that I'm talking to you on.
Yeah, I almost think about this technology. I say the language model computer interface, but it really is the language model machine interface. And it's saying, like, how can we bring humanity's most powerful tools and make them as easy to use as anything else? I really think about it like it's under the hood and it's twisting the knobs of all the deterministic systems that humanity has built. Um, so I envision, be it the O1 because we have a Linux distribution that's coming out, so it can fit into a lot of these devices, or just Open Interpreter, which is right now a Python package. We're gonna have an npm package pretty soon. Um, that you could just use that, tell it where all the knobs are on your machine, and then you have a natural language interface for that system. Um, that, by the way, can not only talk to humans easier, but can talk to other devices easier too. I mean, what does it look like to kind of wrap all of humans, all of our machines in interpreters and these like natural language interfaces that are capable of interpreting what it is that you want in your natural language into, I think, code. It's, by the way, a very opinionated thing for me to be saying that the way that these things should run is by code interpretation. I am very, very firmly in favor of thinking that that's what the future of this looks like. It looks like language models writing and running code. And by the way, that means that this is a tremendous, the difference between it running on Mac or Linux or on a fridge or on, an O1 or something that's in your hand or something that's a super cluster is, it's we've already spent decades building the language interface into machines. It's code. We've this is work that's been done before. Um, so it just gives it tremendous interoperability. If it knows what code to run, be it from its training data or in the system message,
Yeah.
then the language model can twist those knobs.
I just flashed in my mind, my son's friend is blind, and, you go through an airport, well, you look at a screen with the times and all that, that's a computer, right?
Mm,
Could you
mm.
use
Yeah,
this new approach to help somebody who has low vision or is blind, is check whether their plane is on time or not, right? Could it
mm,
hook up to
mm.
that kind of computer, which is really a Windows box, but you can't use it like a Windows box, it's just a display that you're
Yeah.
looking at an airport. And there's lots of displays like that in our lives, right? Trains arriving, subways, right? Are you thinking about really making this a holistic thing that, one device can join all of the digital displays in our lives together?
It's why it has to be open source. Linux runs the world. I mean, a lot of those devices are running on Linux. And, you could make a very proprietary closed system that just some people have access to. Um, but if you really want this dream to come true of the whole world comes alight and is humming with intelligence, it needs to be something that everybody can, like developers, people who are building products, can just inject intelligence into their what they're building. Um, and what's cool too, Michael Tiffany of I believe Human Security, who also owns Ninja.com, is somebody who was involved deeply in the O1 project. He invented the kernel watch, which is the idea that the O1, this computer with the language model at the center of it, um, should be fused at the kernel level with it. It's actually watching the kernel at all times. I could totally go into that. Depends if who we're talking to, if we're talking to the developers or everybody else. But um, he talked about this idea that this technology actually might inspire quite a lot more people building machines to expose more endpoints, basically. Like, right now, what good does it really do for that system that's displaying travel times to be anything more than just pixels shooting light into people's eyes? It doesn't mean so much if that thing is exposed publicly. But if everybody had an interpreter, if every single person had something that was able of making API calls and knew where it was, then you don't even need any extra technology. Like a part of the O1 project was supposed to be the interpreter protocol, which is a way that these devices could communicate with each other. And we realized that's HTTP. They don't even need a special thing. They're capable of just making a post request to other interpreters, to other devices running this operating system and sending whatever information they want, sending skills they've learned, sending information, massive JSON stuff. It's just HTTP. They can experience when they get hit from the post endpoint, and it's read to the language model, and then
Yeah.
they can access that information to what they want. And the idea that we might be living in a world where like a lot of things around us are kind of IoT, a bit like that
Like a
really
gas
only appealed to
thermostat
hobbyists.
or my lights,
Hmm.
right? My lights have a computer underneath them, and,
Yeah,
my iPhone, I can pull out my iPhone and change the color on my lights, right? There's a computer there.
yeah, 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 exactly. And like the incentive for people building those sorts of things to expose that is like, oh, people who love, Home Assistant, HomeKit can enjoy this. And, maybe farming and agriculture, there's a reason to make things kind of IoT-ish. But if everybody has a really, really easy way to communicate with all those endpoints, maybe it becomes really worth it for like your bed to expose like an endpoint with all the temperatures and everything, or any kind of controls around you. Um, yeah, that's a cool vision of the future, and is something that can only happen if we are just totally open.
It you know, let's go completely weird 20 years from now. We're gonna have humanoid robots in our homes and in our businesses. Are they gonna be running this? And is that gonna be how they understand all these screens in the world, And maybe you're at an airport and you send your little humanoid robot, "Hey, make sure our plane is on time," right? And it goes over and checks out the
Yeah,
screen. Or, "Hey,
yeah,
wait by the screen until the gate gets announced," right? I've been in many airports where you have to wait for the gate to be announced, right? So you know where to
yeah,
go, right? Maybe you'll just have your robot standing in front of the screen, Is it
yeah.
is that sort of where you're also thinking like, "Oh, we need to go in a variety of steps to get to that kind of world?"
I think that when that day comes, there is going to be a Linux of that space. There's going to be closed proprietary models of that space. Like, it was totally an accident. We just forgot to Google it. But Figure O1,
Yeah,
is probably an example, or Groot from NVIDIA.
yeah,
These are kind of the closed source platforms. Maybe they'll open them up at some point.
yeah.
For now, that's what they are. And they're kind of the closed source versions of this. Um, Whereas we are literally already an operating system that developers can build on. We just said we're number 2 and number 3 on GitHub, projects worldwide. Already developers are building on this language model operating system. Um, yes, I mean, to me,
By the way,
I think
there's
that
a
there's
new
an
Y
opportunity.
Combinator company that has a little, humanoid robot that's all open source, 3D printed using standard
Yes,
off-the-shelf electric motors and computers and batteries. It costs $8,000 to build. That's coming
I
down to
wanna
the
talk to them.
level where somebody like me can afford one.
Yes, yeah,
But
I
now it
want to
doesn't have
talk
a
to those
smarts,
people.
doesn't have the OS to run it, right? That's why I'm real interested in how you are building a new world, right?
I think, one of the first things that we talked about is, like, we looked at kind of the all the devices that the O1 could inhabit, the bodies it could have, and down to the very simplest, a button, push to talk, to, what does it look like to have this thing with a screen? What does it look like to have this thing on top of a Roomba? What does it look like to have this thing like Wally, or
Mm.
like Her, or the Star Trek computer? But especially in this direction of like of Wally, of like a robot. I mean, there's no difference between this. I've talked to Jason Ma, um, who did the Eureka paper for NVIDIA. So this is like having a language model write code to train um, like much more fine grained robotic actuators. Um, there is no if you solve the problem of how a language model should operate a computer, you solve the problem of how a language model should operate a robot. And that's all it is. I mean, it's just that it's code to run, to set a waypoint, to have this thing go in that direction, or to complete an action. But I very much believe that the problem that we are solving is eventually going to be in the heads of humanoid robots. I think that this is that absolutely a direction that this is going, is to try to start building the little bit of brain that's going to be in everything, but especially in these general purpose robots. And also, it's very much in line with how I think about the right problem to work on, in terms of, I would love for there to be a system. Right now we're trying to build it as fast as possible, something open source and locally running that can control human computers, like computers that are designed for people to use, graphical universes that are designed for people to use,
Yeah,
because so
like a
much of our
Macintosh or a
infrastructure is like,
Windows box or
Yeah, exactly, and that's why people are building humanoid robots. It's not because it's necessarily, like, the most efficient thing, it's that all of our stuff was built for human-shaped.
Yes.
Um, so I it's just in the same it's just in the physical direction, that once we will solve this problem of how to get a language model to control a computer built for humans, then solve the problem of how to get, a humanoid robot. I'm not on the robot side of it, I'm in the intelligence layer of it, but, um of how to get those things to operate human things in the real world.
So what do you use this today for? What do you personally use your system that you're building for, and what's it really great at? You know, what kinds of things? What will the first customers want to try out and use with theirs?
For me, it's media, and I didn't even know that it had any other use cases beyond that when I first put it out.
Mm.
So for me,
Like
like
ingesting a YouTube video and building, a list of what's
yeah,
important in that video, or, like, "Hey, somebody doesn't have an hour to listen to the 2 of us talking, maybe you could ingest it into this and get a synopsis or something like that." I mean, give me an idea of what you're
what
thinking
I
media, 'cause I media is spraying on my screens right now, you know?
yes, yeah, yeah, that's true, yeah. Yeah, I mean, multimedia manipulation and totally stuff like that, exactly. Um, there was, a Sangman was one of the first people to discover this within days of it being out. Um, hard code this YouTube video with Japanese subtitles.
Hmm,
And what's that? It's, actually not very much code, and so this thing's great at it. It's use YTDLP, which is a library for downloading YouTube videos, transcribe it, um, translate that into Japanese, generate an SRT file, and then hard code that with MoviePy, another library. That I mean, it's a small segment of what we're all doing, but for me, who comes from, trying to cut up YouTube Shorts and hard code a lot of subtitles, that's huge. And a lot of it, even for me, honestly, is I really do dream of the world where pretty much everything that I do on a computer can be done by this system instead. Right now, what I actually use it for most, what it's great at, um, is yeah, a lot of media stuff. So converting files, removing backgrounds from tons and tons of images. Like if I have 1,000 PNGs that all have white backgrounds, I can be like, just make them. They shouldn't be white backgrounds. Make those all transparent, and it runs code to get that done. Um, and if you look too into we have a collab notebook, which is just a bunch of examples of, I mean, what is it like to just be talking to a language model that's running code on your computer? Um, can you slow and reverb this YouTube song is a personal favorite of mine because that's a simple just yeah using YTTLP to download a YouTube video, and then I think using Spotify's pedalboard library, almost the way that it is right now because it's so good at Python, uh, pip packages. We're getting it much better at using a graphical user interface, but that's extremely hard. What it's really good at right now is using pip packages. It's kind of like we just managed to expose this ecosystem of open source pip packages to regular people. So Spotify's pedalboard library is awesome and it's fun. It's like a blast to program with it and to make music with it. Only been available to people who know Python until now. Now it's available to anybody who knows English, or whatever else language the language model can understand. Um, so yeah, right now, what it's great at is anything you can imagine doing with a page script in Python. This thing can write the code, run it, usually error out, but then see what's going on with what's wrong with the error, and then fight through that and get that thing done.
You're almost describing a new kind of operating system. Yeah, it's not Windows where you're trying to display a pixel on the screen, but you're building a new way of computers to work with us, right? To me, that's an operating system. Yeah.
You would be surprised how many applications, if you start to really free yourself of thinking that they need to have They need to have been built in the way that they've been built. The majority of applications you use on your computer are lists of dictionaries. I'm sorry, I'm talking now to the developers for a second, but we thought with the O1, like, what would it be like for you to talk to it and say, I want to add Robert to my contacts? And we thought originally it would run on Android and that it would try to use a vision model and our point model, which is capable of finding icons on screens, to tap the contacts icon, then go in and tap, the plus button, and then type in and type in all the information. And then if you want to go find a contact, what's Robert's number? It goes and taps the search, icon after that same thing. A contacts application is a list of dictionaries. If we're just gonna forget about all that and start from scratch and be like, you use this computer by talking to it, what does the operating system look? You can build an entire operating system off of Python primitives, off of dictionaries and lists and strings. You can forget about all that. A contacts list, to add a contact, to append a contact to your contacts, should be as easy as it running Python code contacts.append and then your details. And if it just has in the system message and knows that something it has access to is the contacts variable, which is a list of dictionaries, that's what your notes app is. That's what your calendar is. They're lists of dictionaries. And it is shocking how much bloat you can cut through. Like, it's not bloat. It was all built to try to make it easier for humans to use.
Yeah.
But if what we're trying to get it able to use basically a Python developer that's running code very quickly, you can totally rethink what an operating system is. And that's absolutely what we want to do. Now, right now, to get good interoperability with um, you want to say, add something to my reminders, and then it appears on your phone. That's what you want. So it ought to use the reminders application so that it has this stuff. And luckily, there's great Apple scripts that it can run to get that done. But I really think that in the future, I can imagine the experience of using a computer being I'm talking to a language model. It is writing code to save information and to browse the web and to access these things, knows how to use human operable tools like a web browser visually so that it can sign into services and do things. But that the main way that it actually interfaces with the deterministic system of the computer is by running very little bits of Python code. It's like a Python operating system. And then probably running code to display some kind of user interface in front of me too. I'm not sold that this is all going to happen through voice in the future. Um, but that's very much how I think about it. That this is what does it look like to have an operating system powered by language models?
Yeah, man, it's infinite, right? I'm watching X Pro or what we call TweetDeck, used to call TweetDeck, and, I have all these lists that I've worked, for 18 years building, and it's way too much information for a normal everyday even me, I look at this for an hour and my mind is fried, right? I wanna be able to tell a system like this and say, "Hey, can you watch the list of tech journalists, for instance, and just tell me if anything new is going on," right? Last night a bridge,
Yeah.
fell down in the East Coast. Tell me about the news. That's all I want. I don't need to see all the people talking about what they had for breakfast and stuff like that. I just need the
Yeah.
major news or new things or right, whatever we're seeking out of that. Is that the kind of world we're heading to where we can just say, "Hey, oh, one, you help me watch the news on this, list, or help me watch, the Slack channel." Tell me if my
Yeah.
coworkers are saying anything important instead of just talking about politics or music
Yeah.
or something like that, right?
Yeah. First of all, I'm proud and I want to give a shout out to Ty Fiaro, who's the developer, founding engineer at Open Interpreter who built this, but of our scheduling system that lets you ask it, hey, I want to monitor my email. And that basically sets it to run a cron job to run, have a very natural request to it to check the email for something. Yes, that's exactly the world. And I hope too that folks can have some empathy for um, kids growing up in this. I grew up in this. A if the tweet deck is a lot of information, what's on my screen right now even is a lot of
And
information. I
I'm
mean,
only
it
seeing a
is
little tiny, tiny grain of sand of the beach that is
yeah,
X.com, right? Because
yeah, yeah,
I'm not seeing all the sports people and all the political people and all
yeah,
the music people, right? They all have their own Twitter or X going, and if I built all
yeah,
this for them, I could see a little piece of their world, but a
yeah.
computer can watch a lot of information and a lot of
I
things.
think imagine having a system that was like a window into a classical computer like we have right now, and it just shows you what you need. It just shows you what you ask for. Like, this is like destroyed people's brains. It's or certainly made their lives much harder to have psychologists at massive companies trying to find the exact ways to tighten their psychological grip on everybody using their platform and get them to come back and come back and come back. There's not a real defense against that except at the operating system level. That's why Apple can make great privacy control stuff. Nobody else can. They've sold the phone. So they've made their money. So they can start to be like, use this healthily, please. Nobody else, if you're talking to TikTok and Facebook and thinking about what they want, the Meta, they want you on the platform as much as possible, as engaged as possible, as dopamine out as possible. That's how they and that makes perfect sense. That's exactly the incentive. They have not sold the phone yet. They need you to be coming back. And the only real defense that you have against that, I think, is going to be I say to my computer, I want to know what's happening in the world about this. And it bears the brunt of all of this junk that's been made to try to get humans to stay locked into these things, and then gets the information and then just displays to me a little window around what that information is. And I am protected and I can live my life. I don't even think that there's another defense against it. I don't know how else to change the world and to fix that, other than at the OS level.
And
Um,
and then I just incorporated my company and, the lawyers created a real long document that's very dense, very hard for a human to understand or read. I gave it to ChatGPT and Anthropic and,
yeah,
Flexi didn't ingest it, but, the other 2 ingested it just fine, and then I started talking to it and saying, "Hey, what should I care about in this document? What should I pay extra attention to? Is there anything non-standard in this document? Something that's out of the norm, right? That somebody snuck in there to try to rip me off, right?" And that's what I'm and it did a really confident job, right? Computers can read a long document and ingest it and really see the patterns in that, right? Where humans
yeah,
struggle. Uh,
yeah, yeah. And it shouldn't have to be you kind of showing it every document that it needs to see. If it's capable of operating a computer, then you can ask for just the information that you need and it can pull up the document. I mean, the idea too of like pointing it at a web page, it can be much easier if it's just capable of traversing that pipe to the information as opposed to you needing to feed it into a language model. And so that's what we're building, that pipe.
Now, this is a freaky new world for people because what? You're gonna have a computer that's reading everything on my screen, listening to everything I'm uttering. Someday soon, we'll have glasses on, and it'll know what I'm touching, what I'm looking at, what I'm gesturing toward, right? That I'm gesturing toward the screen right now.
Yeah.
It'll know our emotion. I just interviewed a company that's building an AI that understands our human emotions. So it'll understand I'm yelling at the screen instead
Wow.
of happy, right? Whoo, that's a
Jeez.
lot of
Yes.
private data to give
Yeah.
this new machine in the sky or the machine on my local computer. What do you say to people who are freaked out by this world that are resisting it?
I say that I am cautious too. Um, I don't approach this from like, "Oh, this is gonna be fun. Let's move as fast as we can and do whatever." Um, I think that there's elements of that spirit that I wanna carry into what I do, but honestly, I'm one of the much more cautious people around, people that are doing this. It's probably it's like one of the worst scenarios would be a very, very small code interpreting language model whose objective is to duplicate itself onto a bunch of different systems, for example. I'm worried about that constantly and trying to think about how do you stop that kind of stuff from happening. Um, I'm extremely cautious of it. I'm not one of the people who is even able to. I'm totally cautious about it. But the only antidote to this, for example, rightfully concerned that I'm giving my data to a company. I was just talking about the fact that these are companies that have tried to extract as much value from people as possible by trying to get as much data as possible out of them.
Yeah.
Everyone has a right to be concerned about that. And the only antidote to it is open source, locally running. You have control of your own data. It's like it either is this mainframe IBM world of all of our data is being beamed out to the few language model providers, the oligopoly of that, or we figure out how to get it all running in your hands on the metal in front of you and for you to have total control of that. Because there's a huge group of people that are rightfully concerned about companies
Yeah.
and yet they really would love to have something that was aware of a lot of the things around them and to help them with it. And they don't really have a lot of options right now. Like
Let's
there's culturally a
simple,
lot of
right?
like, don't even use AI.
Yeah, you ask ChatGPT or any LLM, something simple like, "Give me a list of 10 restaurants, you know, that I should go to within 10-mile drive." And it gives you a good list because it has millions of people's patterns and
Yeah.
reviews and all that. But if you tell it a little bit about your food preferences, right, or your allergies, or I'm a vegan. All of a sudden, the list gets better. Well, you just give private information about your food preferences to
Yeah.
what? Chat GPT, open AI, right?
Yeah.
Which might use that in the future against you or for you. We don't know. But this is we're going to do it because it's going to make our lives better. We're going to give it a lot
Hmm.
more data, right? And this leads into new worlds where if you're, let's say you have evangelistic parents, religious parents, and
Hmm.
you haven't disclosed you're gay to them. Well, a computer
Hmm.
can notice patterns and go, "Oh, you're gay." Does it out that? Right? Does that
Yeah.
cause
Yeah.
a consequence to you? You might live in a country where that's illegal, right? And now you have huge consequences to the society, to
Hmm.
people, to individuals, right?
Someday you're gonna have Rex St. John on here, I know. Um, and the way that he thinks about this too is that that's something that if if you have this IBM mainframe world, that's gonna happen. I mean, the idea that you even can go and look at like what's that they tried out the language model that the UAE trained and asked it about homosexuals. It's not good. Like if a government or a company or any central entity is controlling this supply of intelligence, um, like one of the worst outcomes of this is actually having a dictatorship using language models to have perfect surveillance. You need to have something that's close to you, that you have total ownership over, that is completely local, that is protecting you even in this world. Like, whether it's the sole thing and it's just helping you navigate this world, or it's something that is actually by your side helping you navigate those kinds of very powerful, very intelligent entities. Um, that's totally a world I see. And again, the only antidote being something that you have total control over. And yeah, something that's open source. I don't know. I don't know what else you could do. Um, and yeah, that's a huge reason why we're building the technology in this way. It's also for those people just literally in the short term that like they want to use this kind of technology, but they're totally justifiably concerned that a company has their information, they should get to play with this. They should get to shouldn't have to have people who just like they don't like it, so they don't use AI at all. A lot of us want to use AI, but
Yeah.
we're worried about this correctly.
Well, the business people are worried about it. You give a spreadsheet to ChatGPT. What did it just learn about your business? Right?
Yeah,
A lot. Is
yeah,
that your intellectual property? Yeah. Did it ingest the intellectual property? Is it sharing that with other, people? Is it using it for
yeah.
its own purposes to compete with you, right? Amazon is very willing to compete with you eventually. If you're like the guy who makes my clothes, Amazon called him up one day. He didn't even have an Amazon account, and Amazon called him up, says, Hey, we notice a lot of people are searching for your clothes on Amazon. We'd like to we he The first call was, "We'll buy $300,000 of one shirt," uh, right away, right? Because it had the data
Wow.
to know that there was
Yeah.
demand like that. And now he sells millions of dollars on Amazon. But now if you get too popular on Amazon, well, they'll build their own product to compete with you,
Mhm,
Amazon Basics, right? Whoo,
mhm, mhm.
that's a new world we have to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, it was the first interest that made it like, "Okay, this is something that just immediately could help people," is actually, yeah, in trade secrets. Uh, just for there's a reason why they renamed code interpreter to advanced data analysis. I was, like, shocked because that's such a minification of what this thing is. Like, I'm saying the future is here and as a code interpreter, and they have changed it to, like, this extremely narrow use case. They then switched it back. Um, and the reason they did that, though, is because the first people that this is really helpful for is data, scientists and folks that are trying to ask questions about data.
Yeah.
And immediately something that Open Interpreter became that was like, "Oh, no, this can help out a lot," is I want to have every employee a data scientist. Everyone should be able to ask questions about our business data and not get, guessed responses, but run Python code usually to get deterministic responses and to generate charts. And and the world where that's all happening in OpenAI's servers is way less appealing to people that to businesses, frankly, that have trade secrets. Um, and so the idea of being able to have like an on-prem code interpreter, nothing leaves this, it's completely airtight, is pretty appealing. Strictly because of data science, which is like to me not the most interesting use case for it, but a really immediately valuable one. Um, and yeah, just the same as personal data is company data.
I think it's a worthy topic for people to really think through because, you hand a spreadsheet or you hand your Oracle database over to an AI, all of a sudden it knows everything about your business, right? And
Yeah,
probably in better detail than you do, right? A
yeah,
bridge just fell down, last night after a ship hit it, right? Well, what's that causing to the supply chain in the port there? The computer can see those patterns real quick, right? Human takes
right.
a little bit of time to figure it all out, what it all means, but a computer can get ahead of you and
Yeah.
you know, re really understand your business in a way that I don't think most people are prepared for. Do you have a dev is this, a working piece of hardware yet? Or when are the first customers gonna get it so we could try it and see it? And, maybe even come back and get a good demo of the first O1?
We should do that. Next time I'm in San Francisco, I'd love to come out and to do something like that,
Yeah, maybe we should walk around the
there
street
is
and use it and see how it works,
I would
and
love
sit
that.
down at a cafe
Yeah.
and try to use it with a Macintosh or a Linux box and see what it does.
Yes. I would love to do that. Yeah, so the first batch of this, is probably gonna be going out in, like, late summer. That's
Yeah,
what we're anticipating. Right now, you can build one. It's available. I mean, and this is
yeah,
I'll say a rough thing too, which is that for folks that are outside of the US, we decided to start, doing it in the US only. And
yeah,
so I say this too for folks that are outside the US is that it is available. I mean, it's something that if you have a 3D printer and you can order the M5 stack, which is what we use. We're thinking of switching to a better speaker. Um, It's all evolving on the repo, but
Yeah.
the developer preview of this technology is available today. We wanna really iron out how reliable it is and really iron out the form factor into something that's even smaller. We tried to get it down way smaller
Yeah,
with what AirTag
this is a
does.
competitor. I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of the devices are built with the same chipset, right? And you're 3D
yeah,
printing a case for it or trying to build a
yeah.
case for it, right? This is the AI, which,
Which that okay, wait, okay, this is amazing. I was just talking to somebody about this and we couldn't find it. Where be?
yeah, Werebee, dot AI. I'm just, the people are starting to send me all sorts
Yeah,
of different devices like this, right? We have
yeah,
the Humane pin that's coming out.
yeah,
Abby Shipman has the Tab, which is a
yeah.
device that hangs around your neck, and Rewind has a similar device to that, right? Tell me about the competitive landscape and what's going to make the open source world special compared to all those others.
So on day 1 of building the O1, it was originally that because of the Rabbit R1. So we wanted to make an open source version, O1. And we decided on day 1 that we had the opportunity to do something much more general. Um, that if we think about it like you could build something that's very much like a Rabbit R1, or you could build something that's 90% of the way to a Rabbit R1 and to a Humane pin and to a tab. Like what does it look like to have like, okay, everybody's siloed off building in their own directions. This is a great opportunity to try to rising tide lift all boats, catch everyone in this place. Like everybody's building pretty much the same technology in the Humane and in the Rabbit. These are language model computers. They
Yeah,
are computers that have a language model center and that's operating the computer. Let's please unify humanity's efforts and try to make something that is open source, that's most of the way there to each of those products. Um, I think it's such a healthy competitive ecosystem. And I don't really think about it too as much competitive because like I'm still very, very interested um, in the intelligence and application layer, like in the software layer of it. And I'm not a hardware person, and that's why it's been a massive open source effort to build this hardware thing. Um, and I think we're gonna continue to get great bodies hardware that is in that repository in the O1 repo,
yeah.
that's using the operating system. And I'm gonna continue to try to make the operating system better and better, um, along with many, many other people. But I think yeah, I'm excited to get all of them. I've ordered every one of them, and I'm so excited. I just hope that more of them are, open source. And actually, a Deus, one that just came out with was a Compass, is this other, open source wearable, and that's based on, a Deus, which was launched by Adam, who was actually in the early O1 team, and he, I think, realized that, like, that he wanted to do something that was a little bit more like Tab. You said earlier too, like, that it's always listening and that these things I kind of am more of the mind that for trust and control that I would actually like to most of the time tell it when I want it to be listening, so that's why we went push to talk,
Yeah.
um, as opposed to Avi's Tab or Adeus and Compass and all that stuff, which is actually all the time listening. I kinda like I
You
kinda
bring
like,
up a good
push to
point. 'Cause if I'm sitting at my computer, I don't care. I mean, listen to me all day long, watch my screen, help me out,
yeah,
be there, do it. In fact, I use Rewind on my Macintosh. It's listening all the time and
nice.
out of this call, it'll make me a nice transcript, and it will tell me what we talked about and put it in my notes so that, 5 weeks from now, I can search for it and, and find the information that has a memory, right? And this little device does something similar too. It has a wake word. You can talk to it. But when you
Cool.
start wearing these things out in public with your friends, now there's a social contract problem, right? "Oh,
Yeah,
how many devices are you wearing, Killian?" You know,
yeah,
"How many are
yeah,
recording me right now? Can you turn them all off,
yeah,
please? Because we wanna have a private conversation," right? And have some fun at a
yeah,
or something like that, right? And so now you have to take them off or figure out how to turn them off, or have to worry about, are they recording your friends who didn't consent to be recorded? And recording is a funny word because these don't really record, they transcribe into a transcription, right? Which is
Yeah.
similar. But it leads to a whole bunch of social contract and privacy problems, right? Did the other people around you consent to be transcribed and recorded it in some way? Um,
Yeah.
how are you guys thinking about that? How to change the device based on its context? Because some context, I'd leave
Yeah.
it on, leave it turned on. I'd like to talk to this thing all day long, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Other times when I'm out in public, maybe not so much. I wanna turn it on in specific instances, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll just say that this is reminding me just because I just saw Dune of what if it in the future you have like the like silence cone or whatever in Dune. Like maybe nightclubs will be these like spaces where like the silence cone is emitted and then all of your wearables need to like adhere to that and we'll all shut off and stop listening. Um I think that first of all,
That's
this is
frustrating too,
definitely
because
something.
maybe your
Yeah.
friends are like, "Hey, we're getting hungry, right? Oh, let's ask our tabs or our O1s,
Yeah.
where's a great restaurant nearby?" And so again, you need to turn it back on to serve you, right? But it should be the
Yeah.
human that's in control of it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I push to talk is, like, the most, human possible, for me at least, until we understand really how to do wake words very well and that kinda stuff. I think that the O1 OS should support a lot of different types of, wake. So, do you wanna wake it up by pushing to talk or even just by toggling? Do you wanna make it come to life when it hears a particular wake word? I'm very interested too in the world, and obviously you would want this in like a humanoid robot where it's probably going to have a very small model that's trying to predict what you're saying as quickly as possible so as to find when you are going to stop talking. And then the exchange of control of the conversation happens with all of the intelligence of a language model instead of the simplicity of a button. And, I literally think like an environment variable in the O1 OS that determines how it is that you're going to wake it up. There's somebody too that demoed at AI Tinkerers. Anybody, AI Tinkerers, by the way, anybody who's listening to this should go and see if there's one at their city. I host the one in Seattle. A couple hundred people come out and we'll do demos where it's the last one, somebody demoed one that is listening to ambient silence. And anytime it breaks over ambient silence, then that's the wake signal. So you can be in a crowd. I mean, we're in a crowd and he's talking to it. And there's tons of people talking all around, but because it's louder in that moment. Simple, but works. And it should support all those sorts of things. Ultimately, the O1 Lite is a very basic implementation of the O1 OS. Like we're trying to say, this is just kind of the simplest thing that you could build with this. But what's going on here really and what we're really building is something that you can build into your own products. Like I hope, and this is another answer too to the competitive landscape. I hope to see a product come out soon, or maybe even one of these competitors switch to using the O1 OS and or build on top of the O1 OS. Um, it's I think going to be then, am I buying a device that's always on? Like the social contract problem. If we just leave enough options open, that's more of an end user thing. Um, I do think we're going to build some pretty great ones ourselves. Um, I'm very interested in getting into really refining the consumer version of this thing and being a part of that too. And I am only recently a developer, and I've thought much more about design and about the consumer side of it. Um, but to have something that is on, maybe I toggle it. That's how I can kind of imagine this happening. That maybe I would double tap and then it would be on at all times, but it would be on in a silent sense where it wasn't always thinking that it was an assistant being called. Um, yeah, we got to find some good words for this because I definitely think assistant is the right word for something like the O1, the rabbit, the humane. For tab, I think ambient computer. I don't know what's. Do you have any words? Is there any words floating around for you to, like, describe that?
Nothing's stuck yet, but ambient
Yeah,
computing is sort of where we're heading, right? A computer's just
yeah,
listening to me and "Hey, computer, take me, to the Taj Mahal or turn on CNN or"
yeah,
right? Or, "Tell me what's going on X," or "Send an email
yeah,
to Killian," right? Something like that.
yeah,
Um, we're heading to that world. I mean, when you're wearing the Vision Pro, you're sorta always in that kind of world, right? It's
yeah.
not yet completely taken to the nth degree, because Apple doesn't wanna freak out his customers, yeah, right? It
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
developers use the eye data yet or
mhm,
turn on an always listening thing, right? It's you can, but, you then you're in VR and you're explicitly in an app, that does that. It's,
yeah,
where they're holding us back, and I think that's why one reason we're seeing an explosion of these new explorations into these new tabs and pins and things, because Apple doesn't let you do that on a phone. And that
mhm,
you
mhm,
you can't really just turn on an app and, Siri doesn't work that way, right? And just
yeah,
listen to
yeah,
me and do things just because 'cause I'm talking to Siri, right? I have to actually wake it
yeah,
up with calling it, right? So
yeah, yeah, by the way, okay, so this is I might as well answer this, and I think we're out of time, but I'm okay to stay later if you are, but, the idea of, why isn't this an app,
yeah.
is totally a fair question that folks have had, and I say it in the launch video that we are gonna make an app. There's already in the repo, React Native client for this that is just not very far away from being on the iOS and Android store. Um, Totally reasonable question, but there is something happening, about putting the language model above the OS. If you have an app, you have the language model below the OS, and all these privacy things then come down, and it's much harder to build something really interesting with this technology. But if the language model is above the OS and it's capable of calling it up and being called up at any time and having total control, you can start to build some really interesting technology. And that's where we're trying to go. But it's totally reasonable to want an app. I want an app, and we're building one. Um, I'll say too that in terms of Apple, who is obviously going to have an incredible Siri in the next 2 years, and this is another totally reasonable reaction to this. Is I think I'll just wait until Siri is really good. Kyle Orbit, who does OpenPipe, they do amazing fine tuning stuff. You should check them out. OpenPipe. They saw this, what we were doing with Open Interpreter at an AI Tinkers thing a little while ago. And they were like, that seems extremely unsafe. Like this thing's running code on my computer. Are you kidding me? No, we're not kidding you. He says, I think that, after kind of reckoning with it, he said, your edges are your moat. I think like the spiky edges of this thing actually being a bit on the side of like Apple would never do this. You're never going to see a Windows Copilot that's executing arbitrary Python code. You're never going to see Siri executing arbitrary Python code.
Yeah.
You can only explore this in the speedboat, of the startup world where this is something that we can just bypass a lot of that with the understanding with everybody that um, there are absolutely risks in exploring this new space. It's not a place then. I mean, I genuinely think there is an opportunity. It's gone down from like a 1 in a trillion chance to beat Apple at something to for a few years, maybe a few months, like a 1 in a million. And we're taking the shot. And
Your
the
your
idea of
your
edges are
iteration
your moat.
speed is gonna be far even if Siri in June at the WWDC does a really great job, and I'm expecting at least them to fix stupid question. But here's one for you.
Yeah, right?
You park your car, you walk to a restaurant, you get in the restaurant, you get done with your meal, you ask Siri, "Hey, take me back to my car." Can't do it. Doesn't understand what you just said. If you say,
Yeah.
"Take me back to my parked car," it starts up, Apple Maps and takes you back to your car. It knows where your car is,
Yeah,
right? The
yeah.
phone knows
Those are
where
your parked
your car is,
car is.
right?
Yeah.
It's an inflexible AI system that was built a decade ago, and it hasn't
Mhm.
really been upgraded. It doesn't have a large language model. It's not very flexible. It's not modern. It's not, you know, new technology. So I assume they're going to put an LLM or 3 or 5 or 10 in there, and it'll do
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
it'll fix those kinds of things. But is it going to let you run code? Hmm. That's Apple has DNA of, first of all, they have to make sure it's safe for every single human that has an iPhone, which is billions of people, right?
Yeah.
It has to be, it has to do something that their employees can support and teach people at stores, right? This is why the first iPad didn't have multitasking code, right? The first Windows tablet
Right.
did,
Right.
but most programmers aren't rocket scientists who really understand how to write multitasking code. Well, Microsoft thought it was a necessary thing to have multitasking code. Steve Jobs said, "No, we're not going to put multitasking in the first iPhone, right? It's too complex right now. It's too hard for people to do. And it leads to a whole bunch of memory issues and crashes and problems for our customer base. So we're going to just turn it off. We're not going to let you do that."
Yeah.
Now they do now, right? Because they have a much better multitasking system that normal everyday programmers can understand how to build. But in the early days, they just punted and said, "Nope." Right. And the same
Yeah.
thing is going to be
Yeah.
true of this new world. It's like, "Nope, we're not going to try to do any of that Killian stuff. No, 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 no."
Yeah.
Open source stuff. We're going to be very muted and very deliberate, very intentional. Because it's Apple, they have to support it around the world, right? With human
Yeah.
beings who
Yeah.
aren't really ready for this new world. I mean, look at the kinds of conversations we're having. It's a new world that we have to get into of understanding how to run a local model, right? And understanding what the consequences of that are, and
Yeah.
what are the social consequences of running a model that's listening to us, right, on a tab
Yeah.
like that. There's a lot for humans to digest and understand and use and adopt and figure out, right? Apple's gonna just punt on a lot of that until later, right?
Mhm.
And then you're gonna have the early adopters, and you're gonna be able to iterate for those early adopters very, very quickly and add new capability to
Mhm.
the system. Apple's they're not good at that anymore. It's a big, big company with a lot of committees, a lot of meetings,
Yeah.
right? So if they hear something in a store, yeah, they do get feedback from the store. That's the magic thing about Apple. But getting
Yeah.
that into the product and getting it shipped to customers, it takes a lot to move. It's a lot of inertia.
Yeah.
Where you can get on your channel, and in a couple hours, you can bang out a new version, right?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah,
iteration
and there was no
startup is just it leads to a different place than an Apple or a Microsoft can get to.
yeah. Yeah, there was no reason to for Apple to beat IBM. They had no right beating IBM. And, yeah, I think that we will get it safe before they get it powerful. Like, I think that and I can talk for a long we could do a whole other one about the safety of code interpreting language models. It's all I think about. There are these gates of safety that you can start to think about, but I doubt that Apple is worried about that right now. I think that they're starting from the idea of
There
kind
might
of
be a
a much
small
more basic
team that's
system. Yeah.
worried about it, they're thinking the same way you are, but it's,
Yeah.
5, 10,
I'm sure.
50
Yeah.
people, right? I saw this at Microsoft when I was a tablet evangelist. The tablet team knew what was coming, right? They
Yeah.
had a quarter-inch thick tablet that you could type on with a pen, 9 years before Apple came out with the iPad, right? They were
Wow.
bleeding edge
Yeah.
thinkers, but getting the rest of the company to think about it, to use it, to adopt it, to put Office on it, man, it was really
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that they're
I
that
mean,
they're figuring
Kodak
out. Yeah.
invented the digital camera, we don't use Kodak anymore, right? So there was
Yeah.
a group of people who saw the future there, but they weren't listened to by all the chemical engineers who were selling film and
Xerox,
same
even. Yeah.
right, same thing. So this is the world of disruption and,
Yeah.
new ideas start out being only for a few weirdos, right? Who are like, "What?" Like you said, how many tabs are you gonna be wearing, by the end of the year?
Yeah.
You're gonna have a
Kidding.
He-Man pin on and
All
a
of them.
couple things around your neck and one and another
Yep.
one, right? And you're gonna be talking to them all, and then you're gonna be like a weirdo in society. But that leads to, uh, innovation, that leads to a humanoid robot, that leads to real disruption to right? And
Yeah.
that's the game with finding product market fit is the game for startups, right? And
Yeah.
you can find it much faster than a big company can for a new idea, for a radically new idea, right? So good luck.
Yeah. And we're just, yeah, you saying too, I mean, Apple being maybe having a team in it that's 5 people. We're 5 people, 2 engineers on the team. I mean, this is just the beginning.
I
Yeah.
met one of the guys who was early employee at SpaceX. So I said, tell me about the team that wrote the code that lands the rockets back on the barges." He goes, "That wasn't a team.
Yeah.
It was one guy." I'm like,
No way.
"Yeah." I'm like, "What?" "Yeah, one guy." I'm like,
What?
"Why only one guy? Why not a team?" Oh, because one guy can keep all the details in his head of all the change of
Yeah.
all the things that has to happen as that rocket comes back down. Now, he was working with a lot of people, right? But it's
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
one person who wrote the code, and that's why Lockheed Martin still hasn't figured this out, right?
Yeah.
Lockheed
Yeah.
Martin doesn't have a
That's
rocket that
so
can land
incredible.
back on a barge. SpaceX does it every week.
Yeah. I think there's gonna be so many more people like that too. Like, especially as when you get language models into the equation, there's gonna be so much more of that. I so get that.
Yeah. Love what you do. I'd love to have you back on, when you get your first shipment and you can actually, demo this and start showing the
Would love
power
to.
of and then we gotta compare it to the rabbit, and compare it to the
Yeah.
humane pin and the
Yep.
Abby shipments tab and, the rewind thing, right? So and
Yes. Yeah,
there's a couple
let's
I
put them
mean,
in a race.
heck, I didn't even know about this one. These guys sent me this, it's like
Yeah, that one's cool. You should check it out. I just heard about it from a friend and couldn't find it online anywhere. But the bee something, I think
yeah,
that sounds really cool.
it takes great notes on I'm just talking to my wife,
Really?
but, a minute later, it's like, "Oh, you were talking to your wife about buying a Tesla and, doing this and
Yeah.
that." I'm like, "Whoa."
Yeah.
It's a new world,
That's
man.
awesome.
It's a new world of
Yeah.
human assistance, various
Yeah.
kinds, so thank you for
Yeah, it'd
what
be
you
fun
do.
to do something in person. It'd be
Where
really
do we
cool.
learn more about you and the project and the O1 project?
Yeah, so if you go to openinterpreter.com, OPENINTERPRETER, might change that, but openinterpreter.com, and right on the front page right now is you can learn more about the O1. And our GitHub repo is there. Um, and yeah, yeah, I think head there. You can go to updates too and get email updates. We have a great Discord community, thousands of people in there that are developers and people who don't code too. I want to find a better word for people who don't code. There's something much. There's no reason to say it's something like that with a non, but
Uh,
great people are in
User
that
doesn't
community.
fit, consumer
I
doesn't
know, right?
fit,
A person.
creator fits for some things,
Yeah.
but,
We started with
influencer fits for some things, but yeah, it's, you know,
natural programmer. It's kind of interesting to me. A natural language programmer. That what does it look like to have 6, 7 billion natural language programmers is interesting. But anyway, Discord. You can go right to that site, openinterpreter.com, Discord, and updates. Um, and yeah, I would love to see you in the Discord and check out the GitHub. All the source code is there for folks to use and to build on. Um, and yeah, you can get in touch with me in a bunch of different ways. And we have a contact form on the site too.
thank you so much.